So I finished planning all of my pop art candy sculpture piece here. I had my 3 elements that I selected from my artist Romero Brito. I drew my candy nice and large and kind of gave it that same style that he has with the rich thick lines and then the different little quilting patterns and pieces all over. I asked 2 people for feedback. They liked the thick lines and the good pattern changes. They wondered maybe if I should add more colors here in the middle, and then somebody even suggested if I could wrap it in plastic to make it look more realistic. I kind of like that idea. So we'll see how this develops as I start sculpting. For sculpting today, you're going to need a bucket with some water in it, some casting material, foil, and some tape. If you don't have any foil, you can also use newspaper for this next part. So first, I'm going to start with some foil. And my piece of candy was round and had some little edges sticking out where it's wrapped, right? So I have a sphere, so I need a ball, and then I need some of it to stick out a little bit. So I think the best way to get that ball going is to gently, remember we want these sculptures to be bigger than life, to gently kind of shape it into a ball. I'm not squeezing really hard because I want it to be nice and big. You'll see how big it is compared to my hand, right? I want to keep it nice and big. And then to get that wrapping, twisting part, I think I'm going to get some of that newspaper to envelop. So I've gotten a piece of newspaper. I'm going to take my ball, put it in the middle, and if I wrapped it like a real piece of candy, go like this a little bit, and then you gently, you don't want to squeeze that foil down too much, squeeze it. Now these ends are much longer than I need, so I think I'll get some scissors to cut that off. I also need to tape this down so I know where it's going to stay squeezed. This is when having the masking tape nearby is helpful. I like the masking tape instead of regular wrapping tape or Scotch tape because it tends to stick a little better when we get to the part where it gets wet. Make sure the ball's in the middle. Gently squeeze and pinch this one. Get some tape, wrap it around. Anytime you need to hold anything to squeeze and pinch it all, or if you want to add a special shape, masking tape and some extra newspaper around the outside is super helpful. Now that didn't quite get closed. I'm going to pinch it a little bit more there. And I'm going to trim off these edges. Now that I have that basic candy shape, it looks a lot like my piece of candy here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start taking those casting strips that I had, and you're going to want to put them in the water. And they should not be in there very long. Keep them nice and spread out. You don't want them to overlap, so if they start overlapping, you have to flatten it back out. And then you can start adding it to your candy. Now they don't dry right away, so you have to add a little slowly. You want to make sure it's wrapping around some of those edges while you're doing this. I get another strip wet. Make sure it all gets dunked in there. Turn my candy just a little bit. And then I'm going to add it right next to that other piece. I can overlap a tiny bit on the edge, but I don't want to overlap too much because I'd rather have more showing. Now as it gets wet, you'll notice you can spread it out and make it a little bit more smooth. Feel free to do that once it's on there a little bit. Keep pinching around here. So you want it to really stick around these little edges over here. I think my tape came off, so I'm going to fix that real quick before I continue. I don't want it to come unpinched. There we go. I'm going to turn it on again. I'm going to keep doing this. Once I have most of the center part covered, it's okay if there's some paper still showing out here because I'm going to use paint and after this dries to fill it all in to make it look the same. I want to make sure I'm keeping those a little pinched before it goes onto the drying rack. I'm going to check all the way around. I'm going to kind of pick the smoothest side. I can get my fingers a little wet, add a little extra water on there and really smooth it out because I think this is the side where I'm going to emphasize my painting the most. So I want it to be nice and smooth. Again, I'm going to twist those like the candy was twisted a little bit. Squish it and pinch it. And I'm going to carefully set this on the drying rack. Now, say instead you have something like a candy bar or a flat package or a box. What you're going to have to do to fill that in a little bit more is kind of crunch some paper into the rough shape of a rectangle or a square, depending on which one you're building first, and then get your other sheet. After you do that, to bulk it up a little bit, and you can wrap it more like a box shape. Right? So if we do this, now it's puffy. It gives it some shape. And I can just fold this one under this way. And then I can fold the other one over this way. So now it's starting to look more like a candy bar or a box. And then we can get some of our tape here, our masking tape, to help hold it all together. To look more like a candy bar. Now, if you don't need it as flat as a candy bar, you might want to leave it a little puffy on the edge when you're taping it. Leave a little gap in there so that you can make it look a little bit more rectangular. Same process for your candy bar or box, right? As far as the strips go, you can take them and wrap them around either direction. Smooth them out as you go. That'll give you a little bit nicer surface to work with when we add the paint next week. If you smooth it out, it gets rid of all those little holes in there. Make sure they overlap a little bit on the edge. If it's not quite wet enough, you can always add just a little bit more water to it. I have that side to do. And it's almost like wrapping it sort of a bit like a present when you come around those edges. Remember, you're going to have one side that's going to be smoother than the other that you'll accentuate your paint on a little bit more. This side back here I think is going to be my rough and bumpy side. And if your strips are ever too long, you can always take some scissors and cut them down to be a little shorter too. That might help you out so it's not quite as bumpy if it's going to be really bumpy on your artwork. Smooth it out. All those little dots and the holes in the fabric. And then like this one, I don't need a whole piece, so I'm just going to snip what I need so I'm not wasteful. Save some for my classmates. And then I can just put this right here in the middle and smooth it out. This is my back side because it's a little bumpier where I folded over my other end pieces. And now this one looks a little bit more like a candy bar. If it needs to be boxy, you can always just sort of puff it up a little bit more before you put it over on the drying shelf.